Well, down to business now. In the last just under 24 hours, millions of words have been spoken and written about Queensland and the state which Tony Fitzgerald found it to be in. Perhaps not the most delightful state in the world so far as crime is concerned. On the line from BTQ7 in Brisbane, we have a man who's dropped many bombshells himself, Australia's top crime-fighting journalist, Bob Bottom. Welcome, Bob.
Good afternoon.
Well, the Fitzgerald report, what did you think of it, Bob?
Well, I think it was very welcome for Queensland and indeed for Australia. And with all the reaction, I think much of it is justified. But having been around for a while and observed many royal commissions, I feel that there are shortcomings with it. It does provide a blueprint, but I think there are problems with it. And above all, as you see by the reaction around Australia, he gives a prescription for electoral reform and the like in Queensland because he attributes some of the problems to the fact that it's had well, we might use the term corrupt political system. But the fact is he's recommended a new criminal justice commission, and at odds with everything, he recommends that its control be placed in the hands of politicians, unlike what happens in, say, New South Wales with its Independent Commission Against Corruption, which is independent, and others around the world and elsewhere that are independent. He actually comes down and recommends that this Justice Commission, which will, you know, hopefully sort out Queensland, should be directly controlled by a committee of politicians. And moreover, he goes on to stress that it should, the committee that controls it and directs its operations and the like should reflect the majority in the House of Assembly in Queensland. Keep in mind that Queensland, unlike most states, only has one House of Parliament. I see that as a contradiction, and I fear that some of the panaceas, you know, that are being written up may be a little bit hollow.
Bob, as a layman, I just felt there was so much emphasis on corruption in the police force, but so little emphasis, or not nearly as much emphasis as I would have thought, on corruption in politics.
Well, you know, it's not a popular thing these days, and especially in Queensland, to criticise Fitzgerald. He's emerged as a sort of a awe-inspiring figure who terrifies politicians, but the reality is he has singled out the police force, and in fact, in retrospect, he prematurely closed down his inquiry when he didn't need to. He explains that in his report because he said it would have went on, and he admits it would have exposed a lot more. I believe he should have went on in the first instance. Secondly, he held open hearings, and Australia's been regaled with all sorts of revelations and to the public good. But in his report, unlike other royal commissions, he didn't give any findings, and that is a complete contradiction in itself. And moreover, he didn't get into the drug trade, which he ought to. Queensland is the gateway for Australia's $2 billion drug trade. Moreover, as he said himself, if he'd gone on, he would have exposed more corruption in more organisations and against more individuals. Now, he hasn't done it, and I'm critical of that fact. Moreover, since he's put the future commission to look at Queensland in the hands of the politicians that he's so roundly criticised, I look upon it with scepticism, and I know that's not popular to say in Australia today.
What about the gerrymander in Queensland?
Well, there's no doubt about it that there has been a gerrymander, and Fitzgerald has come out with a political document in the sense of suggesting an electoral commission or a system to review that. No more than that. There won't be any change before the election, although there's pressure to do it. All that the government has accepted to do is to set up the review mechanism, and as the Premier, Mr Ahern, has indicated that his party will seek to put a proposition to retain the status quo, that is, the imbalances that occur in the Queensland system. But again, I'd differ with the euphoria that is prevailing today on the Fitzgerald report, and that is that it's seen that if you fix up the gerrymander, you fix up corruption. And though that contributed to the corruption in Queensland over 2 decades or more back in the old Labor government, the reality is it's only a factor, because worse corruption has developed in New South Wales, and corruption almost on the scale of Queensland applies in certain other states, and they have all the checks and balances and far more checks and balances than even Fitzgerald suggests for Queensland. And so it's a nonsense to suggest you fix up a gerrymander and fix up corruption. even in New South Wales, with all its checks and balances, if you get the wrong people in power, you'll have corruption.
OK, but what about Premier Ahern? Watching a lot of him on television in the last 21, 22 hours, it just seems he reminded me very much of a producer I worked with many years ago. He keeps saying, don't forget it was my idea. So do you think at heart level, do you think he's happy with the results?
Oh, I think that, look, this is a very political document. I mean, any government, wouldn't matter who was in power, would love this. Look, the real test of, in the critical terms that I look upon it is, the test of it would be, Fitzgerald, if he'd brought down this report, if Bjelke-Petersen was still in power, it would have been a national joke to put the control of the mechanisms that he suggests in the hands of the wrong person. It just would be disastrous. He's fortunate that you got Mike Ahern. I believe he's a pretty honest guy. He is looking for credit, and it's to his credit, more credit in the earlier period to Bill Gunn, the deputy under Joe, who actually ordered it and fought along to get it. And again, Ahern's fortunate. He's got a police minister called Russell Cooper, a pretty tough, independent guy. I think we'll see it through. But the fact is, in Queensland, you watch, there is a possibility, of course, if the National Party don't like the electoral reform, they could roll Ahern, or there may be a change at the election coming up, and if the wrong person, either after the election or people without a commitment, were in power, this all counts for naught, because Fitzgerald hasn't set up anything. He suggested a mechanism, and at odds with anything that happens elsewhere in the world, he's recommended that the politicians should not only set it up, control it, and direct its most inner operations, which is very, very odd.
Bob, thank you for talking to us today. Just from a completely different point of view, Mr Fitzgerald himself, would he have made much money out of this? Would the fee have been a big one?
Well, it's one of those things. I've been involved now with 16 Royal Commissions and Special Commissions of Inquiry. And I've always been, again, at odds sometimes with people. I've admired and respected Don Stewart, who's just retired as head of the National Crime Authority, and he did a number of Royal Commissions and headed the NCA with all those commissions for 9 years on an ordinary judge's salary. You've had Royal Commissioners come and go, and we never hear of them often after they finish their reports. And they've got sometimes big money, which I don't agree with. Mr Fitzgerald was being paid, to be quite honest, $300 an hour. He would have got well over $1 million. And I might say in closing, I'm a great admirer of his work.
Especially now, eh?
Well, no, I'm critical of his panacea. I don't think it's going to work as envisaged. But more particularly, I think if he had such a commitment to Queensland and been paid $1 million to produce this report, I would have preferred to see him see it through and stick around and see it through, and not bow out as he's done this week to disappear into the anonymity of the bar.
Be a little nice PS for Queensland if that $1 million was tax-free.
I don't think it'd be tax-free. That quite frankly, he would have lost over half of that in tax.
He's still travelling OK, though, isn't he?
I'd say he would be. And, of course, people who do these jobs deserve to be paid good money. But it's no use getting up and whinging, giving homilies if you run these inquiries and you're being paid thousands of dollars a day. There are many people in many walks of life who take great risks and do great jobs for the community over long, long periods for a pittance. And when a man's well paid for a job, we expect a well-done job. And I just find, because I've gone through all of these commissions over the years, I would have preferred to see him, since Queensland, well, the whole of Australia almost held their breath, like Melbourne Cup Day yesterday for the report. He's handed it down, and I have to be critical to say he's not going to have a part in it from now on, and I think that it would have been better for Queensland, because the people have got so much faith in him, if Mr Fitzgerald had said, well, look, I'm prepared to stick around for another year and see it through to make sure whichever government is in power sees it through. Now, he's left it back to the politicians, exactly back to square one, where we all were a couple of years ago, and leaving it resorting to faith in politicians. I haven't got much faith in politicians, as honest as some of them are.
Thank you, Bob. In Queensland, Bob Bottom, ladies and gentlemen.